Down through the ages.
All right, family, it is 10 minutes after 11, and it is the time that you all have been waiting for. Joined live in the studio by Elder Paul Douglas, who is the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer of the Seventh-day Adventist Church World Offices. Elder Paul Douglas, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Welcome and good morning.
Good morning to you.
Thank you so much. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine.
How have our leaders been treating you since you've been here?
Very well, but there's a story I won't tell, though.
Okay. Maybe off air?
It's a story about Pathfinders.
About Pathfinders?
Yes.
Oh, now my curiosity is piqued. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
My pleasure.
As we begin, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, as you said, my name is Paul Douglas. I now serve as the treasurer for the General Conference, the Seventh-day Adventist World Headquarters. That's been my role since April 2021. And then back in June of 2022, was asked to continue into that role. Before that, I served 35 years with a institution of our church called the General Conference Auditing Service. And I served with them also as their director for 14 of those years.
Oh, wow.
I'm married with 3 children, and I'm just happy to be here with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So let's talk a little bit about the church finances. I know that a lot of people have many questions, but first of all, as a church, we know that our main goal is winning souls for Christ, right? We have the Great Commission and all of that. So as a nonprofit organization, how do we measure our financial success, or how do we make our financial goals as a nonprofit and measure that success?
Now, that's a very interesting question, because since, as you rightly stated, our mission is the commission that we have been given by our God to reach people, to teach and to baptize and to prepare them for the kingdom of heaven. So how do you measure success? I would suggest first that success for us would mean that we have taken the gospel to the entire world, not more to frame it in the matter of finances. We need to be prudent in the finances we have, to be effective in the utilization of those finances. So whereas we could spend $10 instead of $20 or 10 rands instead of 20 rands, we need to do that. But in terms of trying to quantify success, I think success from our missional perspective has to do with taking the gospel to the entire world.
Right. And I guess that's one thing that all of us can take part in some way, right?
Correct.
Right. So now, with that having been said, what other revenue sources does the church have, if any? Because we know that we've got the tithes and the offerings. Does the church engage in any other ways of bringing in some kind of revenue?
No, tithes and offerings represent the main source of revenue for our church.
Okay.
We will have interest on whatever resources we have in banks, and that provides some level of resources, but not significant. And there is another source of revenue. From time to time, there are donors, persons who come and make donations and say, we would like to give to the church X amount of money to do this particular work in this particular place. So we have sources of revenue as it relates to donations.
Right.
There's also another source, as I think about it, as persons, as they plan their life estate, as they make their wills, they will say, when I expire, I'd like my assets to go to the church to be able to promote AWR or ADRA or other activities of the church. So beyond tithes and offerings, I would say really donations, those that are planned as part of a life estate of an individual, and those that are just by generosity of those who said they would like to give.
Right. And then with the other organizations, maybe church-run organizations such as schools and hospitals, considering that the church is nonprofit, do those other organizations also operate in the same way?
Yeah, they operate in the same way. Well, they're not run by tithes and offerings.
Right.
Though.
Okay.
For schools, they would be run by tuition. For hospitals, the revenue, patient revenues, and so on and so forth. But yet, in spite of their differences in roles, they also are considered not-for-profit. Their focus is really the total mission of the church.
Right.
Education has a role to educate persons for eternity. The hospitals to both teach as well as heal. So their role is still considered not for profit.
Right. Right. I like when you call it not for profit. I recently learned the difference. Is there a difference between not for profit and non-profit? Yeah. While profit is not our goal,
correct,
it doesn't hurt if we can somehow,
Yeah, you need to make you really need to have more income than expenses.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
So,
right.
but the goal and the mission and the expectation is that you're not for profit. You have a missional purpose that you're trying to pursue.
Got it. Now, in the age of social media, it's become very easy for misinformation to spread around. And there are many different ideas about what actually happens once someone drops their tithe envelope into the basket in church. Can you share with us maybe from something that a layman can understand? How does the whole process go from the moment that I return my tithe? What happens after that?
Okay, well, let me speak of that in some general percentages to at least give an idea to a person who is listening. So the tithe, and let's call that tithe in this instance $1.
Okay.
That 100% of that $1 leaves from the local church to the conference, which we have designated as a denomination to be the storehouse, the collection point. That conference, that local conference, keeps 80 cents of that dollar on average to pay for the pastors and to pay for the Bible teachers in schools and to carry on that work within that assigned territory. The next level of our church is considered the union. It's a group of conferences that make up the union.
Right.
So the union gets a portion of that tithe, and it then allows it to administer the work in a broader territory for the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Then the unions are part of what we call divisions. So in this division, the Southern Africa Indian Ocean Division, where we are right now, it has several unions as part of the 23 countries in this territory. The division has a portion of that $1 of tithe. Then there's the General Conference in Silver Spring, Maryland, that of all that 100% of $1 that come in, the General Conference receives 2 cents of that $1. And of that 2 cents, it uses that then to promote and support our missionary program around the world, to also support the ministries that take place from the General Conference. So that $1 that is placed in the plate by that faithful member, a portion used by the conference, a portion used by the union, a portion used by the division, and a portion used by the General Conference.
Wow. So it really goes far and wide. And it's so important, I think, for us to recognize that each of us has a part to play, even if it's just in that way. And I like that you used $1 as an example, because no matter how small it might be, God, I remember hearing someone say, God doesn't measure the size of a gift by how much you give, but by how much is left. And I thought that was incredible. But yeah, thank you so much for explaining that. Another thing that often pops up sometimes on social media is the idea that the giving in the church seems to be one way. Sometimes we have, some of our people have that idea that it's just us giving to the church and it never comes back. Can you share with us maybe some ways that the church actually does give back, and maybe how we can also get involved as like on an individual or local church level?
Now, the idea of giving and it never coming back, it's really a misconception. Because let's take that same $1.
Right.
That $1 left from the local church and went to the local conference, and they used 80 cents. They used that 80 cents to support the work in that same territory where all of those churches would be. The pastors, the mission activities, all of what happened in that territory came out of that 80 cents that remained at the local conference. Now, the others that go up to the union and to the division and the General Conference, they also in turn send back appropriations. So the General Conference will send back an appropriation to the division in terms of how it uses it for missional activities in its territory. The division will do the same for the union, and the union will do the same to its conferences. So the idea that all is just given and none comes back really is a misconception on many parts.
Right.
And I would add in that recently, in 2021, there was a member who, as part of their life estate, decided to set aside several $1 million to the General Conference without any restrictions to be used by the General Conference. And what we decided to do, instead of making it part of our budget, because you always want to balance your budget, we made a very calculated decision that we would set aside these resources with the intent to support local churches in their I Will Go initiatives.
Okay.
So instead of just keeping it at the general conference, we're working with divisions and their plan giving and trust services departments to encourage local churches or groups of local churches to come up with innovative programs of how they will impact their community.
Wow.
Not to build a church, not to build a school, but to identify some areas of impact that would never be done. So I believe, and obviously there's not enough money to go around to all the churches we have, but the idea of the General Conference expressing an interest in the local church has happened to be considered a novel idea. But I believe in this particular division in Zimbabwe West or Zimbabwe Central Union Conference, they have 3 projects right now of the 19 that were approved that are actually in progress.
Wow.
So those of you who are hearing me at this point in time, if you have a local church, get together with your pastor, get together with your board and church leaders, and try to apply for some of these funds that are available to support initiatives of I Will Go, innovative initiatives in your local conference, in your local church.
Wow. Well, so if I, as an individual member, have some money that I'd like to give back, maybe I see a need in my community. Maybe I want to buy new chairs for our church schools, for the kids at the school, or I want to buy shoes for the children at my village school, things like that. How would that process go? How do I go about that?
You could donate that at your local church, and your local church could administer that in their community. Or you could donate to the local conference, and they can put that together with other resources to make a greater impact in what you desire to have happen.
So you can be specific about the project that you are supporting.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting. And so now looking back at the fact that we're just still kind of reeling from the effects of the pandemic that the world just experienced, how did that affect the church? How did that affect the church, especially with regards to our finances during the pandemic and post-pandemic?
So I would say the pandemic really created some difficulty, not because persons did not want to be faithful in their giving, but they probably did not have the ability to give because the churches were closed. They had no place with which they could return their tithes and their offerings to the Lord. However, in some of the divisions, they already had in place some electronic abilities for persons to give. And they did not see as much of a decline in terms of their giving patterns.
Right.
Now that we have been post-COVID, we have seen a rebound in terms of the giving at 2019 levels or 2018 levels, or even in excess of that. So we're thankful for God that now persons have the opportunity to give, and persons have now even redoubled their efforts in giving, because I kind of think that people have a sense the Lord is coming soon. And let me get my own house in order. And let me also let the resources for which I am just a steward be placed to work in God's cause.
And that's so encouraging. It's encouraging to know that, because sometimes it's good to know that other people are returning tithe. Other people are still faithful and have bounced back, because it gives me less of an excuse. If I thought I could hide behind others, it gives me less of an excuse. But in closing, anything that you'd like to share with us regarding any plans that the church might have for the coming year or the coming quinquennium, as we like to say, any plans that you can tell us about, or how we can get involved?
Well, the church is currently in the strategic plan of I Will Go. I will go not only from a corporate perspective, but I will go from a personal perspective. And each member really needs to find some way that they can be involved in sharing God's message, God's 3 angels' messages to a dying world. So I think that is our focus right now. Also, from a corporate level, we're looking at how do we refocus ourselves in such a way that we're spending less money on the machinery itself and more money on the mission. And I think that process is something that will be engaging by the General Conference, the divisions, and we would hope the unions and the conferences and churches to ensure that all we're about is the matter of mission and making sure our resources are properly aligned to that one and singular purpose.
Amen. Amen. Elder Paul Douglas, thank you so much for your time this morning. We appreciate you coming through. God bless you.
God bless you too. My pleasure.
Family, that was Elder Paul Douglas, the CFO and Treasurer of the General Conference, joining us live in studio. I hope that answered some questions that you all might have. It's been a blessing and an honor having him on air, and I hope that you were all blessed by that conversation. This is the Mid-Morning Empowerment on Adventist World Radio, powered by SID Media.
You are tuned into Mid-Morning Empowerment here on Adventist World Radio, powered by SID Media.